You know when you're watching like a major sporting event or some other extreme achievement and you know there's greatness on the horizon, but you can also see how it could all go so terribly wrong? It's kind of how I feel about MechaBREAK, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Ejection sequence.
Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, primarily my coverage of turn-based strategy RPGs, but also dipping into things like From Software action RPG titles or mech stuff, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. So the MechaBREAK closed and then open beta has come and gone, and I really enjoyed my time with it, but I have a lot of thoughts. First off, if you're not aware of what MechaBREAK is, it's a really sick-looking 6v6 action PvP mecha game that first got shown off about a year ago, I think, at either the Game Awards or Summer Games Fest or something like that. The game is currently in development and coming from Korean team Amazing Seasun Games, known for the previous free and very well-reviewed Snowbreak Containment Zone. Me, being the huge mecha nerd that I am, immediately was intrigued when we first saw this shown off, and so I decided when we had the opportunity to check out what MechaBREAK had to offer. It's got a lot of really slick mech designs, drawing a lot of inspiration from things like Gundam and Evangelion, and seems to actually have a bunch of designers from those very, very classic mecha shows and franchises, as well as things like Macross and potentially Votoms, other things like that, who've worked on the designs for these mechs. You take control of one pilot out of 6, going on various different missions that are team-based objectives, either just raw kills or holding certain zones, activating gravity hammers or deactivating gravity hammers if your opponent has them, pushing carts, the types of things that you would probably expect from a 6v6 PvP game. And from what I've played thus far, the game is tight. It is fast and snappy, despite all the chaos that you would expect from mecha combat with all of the UI elements, bullets and missiles and lasers flying everywhere. I was actually surprised how well I was still able to keep track of what was going on the battlefield at any given moment, figure out where my targets were, where I was getting attacked from, react appropriately to how my opponents were moving while dodging attacks myself, things moving into and out of melee, range, flight, ground combat. There's a lot going on, but it feels very intuitive and natural all the same, which is very impressive. The sound design is awesome, the graphics are just beautiful, and the game runs pretty damn smoothly as long as you're outside of a loading screen, which I definitely saw some jank on. But even on my system, which is a pretty solid mid-range piece, I was running everything on max that I could, and I had no issues whatsoever, and the game looks beautiful as a result. The controls felt great, far better on mouse and keyboard than on controller, I have to admit. Hopefully we see some improvements in that regard. It felt a little clunky on controller, but M&K felt phenomenal, and that's coming from someone who doesn't prefer to be an M&K user, so that's really impressive. And every hit and shot and impact that you have feels really chunky. It's not in the same gritty, heavy way that something like Armored Core 6 does. It's definitely a lighter, more sci-fi, less realistic Gundam style, but it still feels good to fight things, and that's always very important. However, this game is clearly going to be potentially a free-to-play nightmare. I say potentially because, again, Amazing Seasun's previous game is very well regarded, but immediately on launch, you can see all the different forms of monetization that are going to be at play here. Bundles, battle passes, loot boxes, character skins, and purchasable cosmetics, like purchasable mechs, purchasable unique characters. There's a lot, like 8 different resources that you earn to do different things, and perhaps the biggest offender, you get upgrade modules for your mech from loot boxes. And that, more than anything else, makes me terrified and is a giant red flag. We'll talk about that near the end. I want to go a little bit more into combat and how things work, but I wanted to put it out there now because, yeah, this is how this game is going to live or die. What it does with its microtransactions, what it does with its monetization, could very, very easily shatter any semblance of game balance in half if people can just go out and buy a bunch of boxes and get a bunch of the best upgrades and just literally have a numerical superiority advantage over even the most skilled player. So we'll talk about that at the end. First off, the actual gameplay. When you first launch in, you have a fairly solid tutorial that seems like it could be setting up more of a single-player story, but I haven't really seen any indication that that's actually going to exist outside of the tutorial. But it seems like an interesting world, some fun action sequences with some really big, impressive bosses. Perhaps there's going to be co-op missions, that type of thing. I didn't see any of it in the beta, but that's, not necessarily indicative of anything. Could have just been the multiplayer beta. And this is the part where I need to issue a slight correction because I have embarrassed myself and referred to the mechs as breakers throughout the entire video, as opposed to the strikers that they are actually supposed to be. So, yeah, my bad. It's strikers, not breakers. Carry on. You get access to your first mech called a breaker, which has a pretty fun mix of mid-range shooting, melee combat with a laser blade, kind of zippy, but also chunky and armored enough to take some hits. And that's before you get a new armored mode where you have a big shield, way heavier armor, and a really nasty laser halberd. This feels pretty okay to use. It's a little clunky going back and forth between having this more heavily armored mode and then purging your armor, changing your weapons up, and continuing on. It does function as essentially a second health bar, which is nice, but it wasn't my favorite. However, once you get out of the tutorial, you immediately begin to gain access to other breakers, and you get the ability to research the ones that you would like to utilize permanently by the materials that you get from completing missions and leveling up your battle pass. I chose to go with this chunky lad here, an ultra-heavy defender with quad Gatling cannons and a goddamn back-mounted howitzer cannon, and the ability to go into a shielded siege tank mode. And that is my jam. Gundam Heavy Arms enjoyers out there, oh boy, you're going to like this one. There's something to be said for just flying up on a point at pretty fast speed, actually. It's certainly not the fastest mech around, but like, it's got more oomph to its thrusters than you would expect. Just flying in, landing on an important point, or maybe a tall vantage tower, something along those lines. Going siege tank mode with all of your shields up, and just unloading on everybody. I mean, you can see the footage here. Just the sheer amount of firepower that I was able to put out into anything and everything to lock down a point and cover my teammates was ludicrous. Like, I can only imagine how frustrating it was to have to fight me with this mech. And, like, I was initially thinking that it might have to be nerfed. Actually, it felt so strong, but then as I started to fight better opponents and different types of mechs, snipers, flyers, lasers, etc., it felt less powerful, but still good, for sure. Speaking of which, there is a very nice variety of different styles of mechs. You've got light attackers, heavy attackers, ultra heavy attackers, light supports, heavy defenders, ultra heavy defenders, mechs that can heal, that can snipe, that can turn invisible, that can put up decoys, you can drop shields, go into super heavy melee mode, just fly up in your face and beat the crap out of you. A really nice variety of different types of combat styles here. And while it doesn't seem like you can necessarily swap out the weapons that you have on your breaker, it's possible that that's just something that's set for the beta, because you can go and inspect everything in the menu. So I'd be surprised if you couldn't maybe like unlock different loadouts for a given breaker that still fit within its overall gameplay style. Once you're in combat, you have a nice mix of, it almost feels like action RPG, Souls-like combat, but with a much more mecha flair. It's not like something like Armored Core where you only have AP and nothing else to work with unless you have like a shoulder-mounted shield. Here you have shields, you have extra armor that recovers, you've got your actual physical armor that is your total health bar, and then you do have other defensive options like deployable shields, handheld shields, etc. The idea is that you want to use the appropriate type of weapon to break down your opponent's shields and then get in and hit them either in melee or with the appropriate type of gun to deal the most damage that you can to their actual armor. And it gives a nice back and forth as you're trying to figure out, okay, in this situation, given who I'm fighting or maybe the squad that I'm fighting, what types of teammates that I have, who can I target where and how to put out the maximum amount of damage. Occasionally you will be able to get a stun on enemies as well, so then you can really go in on them with melee. This is something that was particularly efficient with my siege tank breaker, because if I timed deploying my shield mode efficiently while someone was coming in to try and hit me in melee, it basically functioned like a parry, knocked them back and stunned them, so I could train all 4 Gatling cannons on them and annihilate them. It was never like a one-hit kill, like guaranteed thing, fortunately, because that'd be busted. But it happened to me a couple of times when I first started playing, and then having the chance to do it to other people, ooh, I relished that opportunity. It felt so, so good. Because these different overlapping, intermeshing systems, it does feel like there's a lot of dynamic gameplay options available. And I can only imagine how that's going to evolve as different breakers become available that have different types of loadouts. Like something that I didn't really see a whole ton of was any sort of like missile barrage, think a Balteus style mech, that could definitely have an interesting long range armor penetration, explosives, AoE type of vibe to it. And I'm sure something like that is going to exist. I just didn't get the chance to see it during the test. Thus far, the missions that I got to play felt varied enough. There was only a few maps available, but each one did absolutely have different gameplay styles that it required. Like, for example, any sort of mission where I had to quickly move around the field and capture different points, take the enemy from taking different points. Didn't feel the best for my ultra-heavy defender with the quad cannons, but missions where I was holding a particular objective and just needed to stay there or needed to guard a cart and move it, that was where I shined, and it felt awesome that those different types of missions were available. I think I saw 5 different missions overall, and there might have been more. I didn't have too much time to play while the beta test was open, but just seeing that there's a decent variety of things already, even a lot of them are taken from genre staples like Overwatch and the like, still having that variety due to the mecha gameplay that's very different from a standard hero shooter made everything feel very fresh. You have a ping system, so you can direct, okay, target this here, protect this target here, protect this allied mech here, apply this type of damage here. There's a good variety of different ways that you can communicate with your team, as well as an in-game chat that I did actually make decent use of to coordinate people and receive healing, which was also pretty nice. It's hard to judge how progression is going to go, and we're going to start talking about the actual microtransactions and monetization here in a second as kind of a segue, but when you initially complete the first round of tutorials, the beta test immediately jumps you to level 30 in the current battle pass and unlocks a new, very powerful breaker for you. So it had a little bit of a warping effect on how I was able to kind of judge how quickly you're going to be able to progress through these passes, which is going to be very important since, again, you're going to be getting like upgrades for armor, boosters, shields, that are going to be very important from these different levels and from the different, essentially, loot boxes that you get from it. I played maybe 5 or 6 missions and progressed 2 levels. We'll see if that winds up being a consistent leveling system or if it's going to get slower as you go. You know, if it starts off really fast and you blaze through the first few levels and then it slows down significantly, as these types of games tend to do. It's very possible, but initially it did feel like progression was pretty solid. As you progress, you will be able to get the different resources that you need to unlock various different options, whether it be cosmetics for your custom pilot or, you know, a actual preset pilot with their own design and their own mech that you can then start using. And then you actually have different quests for playing with different types of characters as well, which does add some extra seemingly bonus XP or different levels of progression. Like, I played exclusively my custom pilot, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed being able to play with this character that I had made with the very meticulous character customizer, which we'll talk about too. But you do also have the option to get some of these other characters and then level and do missions with them. So it does seem like there's going to be some variety there that wants you to switch things up, not just in terms of what breaker you're using, what pilot you're using too, which is cool. Speaking of that character creator, we will touch on that quick because, again, it's definitely going to be part of the monetization of the title as well. The character creator is like alarmingly in depth. That was the number one thing that I saw a lot of people talking about on social media once the beta went live. You have a wide variety of customization options in terms of how you want to set up your character. And, like, of course, game like this, everyone's going to be crafting their perfect waifus, and oh boy, you can make some very exaggerated proportions on those ladies, let me tell you. But it seems like the customization options for the men are just as good. And while you can create some hyper-exaggerated waifuism type characters, or some truly horrifying gremlins as well, which is always fun, you do have the ability to make some really, like, nice, attractive characters with a wide variety of options. You could use more hairstyles, sure, more pilot suit options, but those are things that you're going to unlock and buy as you go. Of course, they want to be able to sell you some of that stuff. But even the options that are available make for a very wide variety. You can choose from a number of preset options for face, body type, arm length, hairstyle, etc. But you're also able to get into the nitty-gritty of everything. The length and width, the depth of your brow versus your cheeks, the slope of your nose versus how protruding or concave it is, the width of your nostrils, whether the nose points up or down, how far set apart or close together your eyes are, how much of a slant they have, the exact color of the sclera versus the size of the pupil versus the reflection in your eyes to get all sorts of different effects, entire gradients for hair so you can have something that just looks like you went and got an incredible level perm at a salon, or your character jumped straight out of Genshin Impact or Final Fantasy. The length and width and depth and girth and skinniness of legs and arms and hands and fingers, individual control over different parts of the body that are like intensely modifiable. Like, there's names for body parts that I know are literally like proper parts of the body, scientific terms that I have no idea what they are. And that's before you even get into things like makeup, eyeshadow, lipstick, freckles, being able to move and change the position of all sorts of different scars, birthmarks, different types of makeup, tattoos, facial markings, being able to shift them all over the place. Like, initially, since it was a beta test, I think a lot of people went with a lot of very basic options, but as people get into the game, potentially are able to buy other cosmetic options, or even just have as much time as they want to sit in the character creator and craft a completely unique character, I was extremely impressed, man. Like, I was not expecting a level of care put into character designing here that we got. It makes sense, of course, because, like, you know, part of a mecha game or a mecha setting is the pilots themselves. That's usually what makes the setting interesting. And you do see your pilot a fair bit, and with a fair bit of fan service, too. Like, holy crap, look at what you see every time you get into your core, every time you get destroyed. Like, whew, man, they know exactly what they're doing. But it is cool that you actually get to see your pilot and actually have that be a part of your character that you get to enjoy. Now, though, of course, we do need to talk about those monetization options, what we're likely to see here. And again, this is where the game is really going to live or die. I saw people talking about it in the general chat in the game as well. It is going to be so easy if Amazing CSUN Games allows you to purchase the loot boxes or any sort of levels that get you more loot boxes to get upgrades for your breaker. Because they're small upgrades at first, but you can apply them over time, and you unlock the ability to equip more over time. Like, I was getting some epic, I guess you would say, rarity upgrades that like gave plus 6% booster speed for a 5% increased cost in energy usage, wind boosting, things like that. Different types of armor bonuses, different types of damage bonuses. This could be a major problem. If it's something that you can only earn from playing, you're not able to buy these particular upgrades or levels in the past that get you those upgrades, sure, then that could be okay because it's going to reward you for playing. And yes, you're still going to then have the people who are just die-hard obsessed with the game and grind endlessly to get the strongest stuff, a la things like Warframe, but that at least would be more fair. If all you can purchase are different cosmetics for pilots, different breakers, which could still be a problem, but then if those breakers can still be earned in some way in game, then again, you've got that kind of free-to-play game balance. A lot of people don't like it still, and I understand that, but if it is at least earnable, that's okay. If you're just getting cosmetic stuff and purchasing things that you would otherwise be able to unlock in the game anyway, it's okay. If you're able to directly pay for upgrades via purchasing mass amounts of loot boxes or just maxing out a battle pass or anything like that, that's going to be a problem. The other thing that could be a problem is if battle passes are paid, which I imagine they're going to be, and then have these boxes and these upgrades in them. Anyone who is trying to be free to play is still going to wind up losing out over anyone who is paying because, again, you could be getting all of these upgrades out of the battle pass that you might not otherwise get if you're just playing normally. So, again, this is going to be a really contentious problem. As far as how expensive anything is going to be, I don't know. I checked out the store, but you weren't able to really purchase anything. You were given a ton of resources that would otherwise be paid to just unlock whatever cosmetics you wanted, unlock whatever mechs you wanted, all that type of stuff. The store was not functional, makes sense. It's, early access, alpha, beta, so it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to do that in the playtest. But the fact that it exists at all is concerning, and we're really going to have to see how pricey some of this stuff is and what they're expecting you to dish out to get very core aspects of the game. All this is to say, I really have high hopes for MechaBREAK. I got in there and did some multiplayer matches with my buddy Dante. I wanted to try and play with my buddy Aiden as well. He wasn't around at the time, unfortunately. And it felt like a ton of fun to play. Just beginning to figure out how can we work together on voice comms, how can we have complementary effects from the different types of breakers we were using. Dante was using the extremely lightweight attacker that can transform into a jet and zip around the battlefield, deal a lot of damage, but was made out of paper, versus my ultra heavy defender that could just hold a spot for seemingly forever. having that interplay of different combat styles and being able to work together felt phenomenal, even if it was just 2 of us out of an overall team of 6 against another team of 6. It was frustrating at first as we were trying to figure out what the heck was going on and playing against people who were clearly better than us, but it didn't take long to get locked in and actually be able to start really competing. It felt great, and I can only hope that that feeling continues through good game balance, and again, potential issues with the monetization stuff aside, there's a lot of promise here. If you're the type of person who was looking for more intense, more Gundam-style action, something a little bit less gritty, more flashy than what Armored Core 6 had available, if you're looking for something that had a lot more PvP going on in it than the there but fairly basic arena and ranked and everything that does exist in Armored Core 6, especially the bigger teams, objectives, all that type of fun stuff, MechaBREAK very well might be for you. We don't know when exactly it's going to be coming out. It's slated for some point in 2025 currently, but we don't know anything beyond that. And as of right now, while this playtest was only on Steam, it does appear to be coming to the PlayStation and Xbox consoles as well. So if you're a console gamer, you'll be able to get in on this one, presumably at some point in 2025. All things considered, we're going to have to keep our eyes on this one, everybody, and just really scrutinize the decisions of the devs to see if it's something that's going to be worth our time, if it's going to be just thrown on the scrap heap and be dead on arrival, or actually have some potential. A lot more free-to-play devs have been a lot smarter with how they're handling monetization things and trying to balance the new player experience, the whale experience, the free-to-play player experience. So there's definitely the possibility this could be good, but there's a lot of Icarus potential here if they fly too close to the sun, so we're going to see how it shakes out, but I'll definitely be keeping my eye on it. With that said, though, I'm going to start wrapping this one up here. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts about MechaBREAK down in the comments below. Do you think it's going to crash and burn? Does it have potential? Did you play the playtest? Did you enjoy it? Strike up a conversation down there. I want to hear what y'all think. And until the next time, I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.